Welcome to Notebook Summaries. Today, we're jumping into the deep, layered history of Jordan. It's a country that's always been shaped by its geography, a real crossroads for ancient empires, and today, somehow an anchor of stability in one of the most volatile parts of the world. All right, so here's how we're going to tackle thousands of years of history. We're breaking it down into 6 key chapters, starting way back at the dawn of civilization and bringing it right up to the present day. So first up, let's head back to the ancient world. Long before Jordan was a kingdom, this patch of land was center stage for some of humanity's earliest towns and, later on, some truly incredible kingdoms. I mean, just look at this timeline. The human story here is basically continuous. You've got Stone Age hunter-gatherers, then some of the first farming villages pop up. Then come these powerful tribal kingdoms, Ammon, Edom, Moab, names you might even recognize from the Bible. And eventually, the big players arrive, and the whole area gets absorbed into the Roman and then the Byzantine empires. It became a really important eastern frontier for them. But honestly, the real superstars of this whole early period? The Nabataeans. These guys were master strategists. They were Arab traders who basically saw a gap between bigger, warring empires and just went for it. They got ridiculously rich by controlling the trade routes for things like spices and incense, and their real genius was in survival. Get this, they engineered ways to capture and store water right in the desert rock, which let them build their amazing capital, Petra. Okay, so after the Nabataeans, the role of this region changes a lot. For the next 1,000 years or so, it's less of an independent power and more like a valuable piece of property that gets passed between huge competing empires. And this is where you really see that whole crossroads idea play out. After the Byzantines, the area becomes part of the big Islamic caliphates. When the capital was nearby in Damascus, Amman was a pretty important town. But then, the next dynasty moves the capital all the way to Baghdad, and suddenly the region's not so important anymore. Later, it becomes a battleground during the Crusades, and after a few more changes, it lands under the control of the Ottoman Empire for a solid 400 years. Now, that word control is a bit misleading, because while the Ottoman Sultan was technically in charge from far-off Istanbul, the real power on the ground, well, that belonged to the powerful Bedouin tribes and their charismatic leaders. Yeah, for centuries, if you wanted to know who was really running things, you wouldn't look to the Sultan's palace. You'd look to the desert. Politics here was this complicated dance of rivalries and alliances between these massive Bedouin tribes. Families like the Al Fayez and the Al Adwan were constantly fighting for control. They were battling over everything, grazing lands, trade routes, you name it. They were basically running their own show, far from any Ottoman control. And then the 20th century arrives, and everything changes. I mean, the collapse of one massive empire and the ambitions of a new one are about to come together and forge the country we recognize today as Jordan. So this is where local ambitions crash right into global politics. You've got the Great Arab Revolt, led by the Hashemite family, with a ton of support from those local tribes we just talked about. They managed to kick out the Ottomans, but a new power, Great Britain, steps in. Into this messy situation comes Abdullah, a Hashemite prince. The British, looking for a way to keep things stable, basically draw a line on the map and create a new place, the Emirate of Transjordan, and put Abdullah in charge. So they finally have their own state, but the story is far from over. In fact, you could say the hardest part was just beginning. From the moment it was born, Jordan was thrown right into the middle of the region's biggest conflicts. And there it is. In 1946, it's official. The British mandate ends, and the fully independent Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan steps onto the world stage. But that new independence is tested almost immediately. Just 2 years later, the 1948 Arab-Israeli War completely changes the country. Jordan gains control of the West Bank, but it also has to absorb hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees. Think about that for a second. The country's population more than doubles, literally overnight. That changes everything. And if you thought that was intense, the next decade pushes the kingdom to the absolute brink. First, in the 1967 war, Jordan loses the West Bank, which causes yet another huge refugee crisis. In all that chaos, the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, sets up what was essentially a state within a state inside Jordan. Tensions just keep rising until 1970, when it all explodes into a brutal civil war called Black September. It was a fight for the soul of the country, and it only ended when the Jordanian army managed to force the PLO out. So that brings us to more recent history. Under a new king, Jordan has managed to carve out a really specific role for itself. It's become this anchor of stability in what is, let's be honest, a very stormy sea.
And this really is the central question, isn't it? Here's a country with almost no oil, very little water. So how does it survive, let alone stay stable, in such a tough neighborhood? This was the huge challenge facing King Abdullah II when he took the throne back in 1999.
Well, the answer seems to be this incredible high-wire balancing act. On one hand, you've got really smart policies. The peace treaty with Israel in '94 secured their border, they've pushed economic reforms to bring in money, and when the Arab Spring swept the region, the monarchy got ahead of it by starting its own reforms. But on the other hand, the challenges are constant. Chaos from the wars in Iraq and Syria, the threat from ISIS, and the incredible strain of hosting millions of refugees, which pushes their resources to the absolute limit. So, in the end, Jordan's story today is the same story it's always been. It's a story of location. Its biggest challenge, today and tomorrow, is how to balance the needs of its own people with the non-stop crises happening all around it. Thanks for watching this explainer. If you want to explore more of the region's history, be sure to check out our Quick Country Histories playlist. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to Notebook Summaries so you won't miss our next one.